Hello, welcome to Special Stage. My name's Luke Whitten. We're going to get right into it. There's lots of news happening in the world of Australian rallying at the minute. I've got Peter Whitten with me. Peter, there's so many state rounds we're going to go through very, very quickly. The Dwyers, Mel Keogh, Craig Rando, Steve Maguire as well. It was a big weekend.
It certainly was, Luke. Yeah. For us based in Victoria, there was nothing really happening. So it was good to watch the results online and see what was happening in other states.
That's right. Plenty of stuff going on. So congratulations to the winners across there. The ARC entry list has come out for Gippsland as well. So that's a huge, huge entry. We've also got a vote live on our website now about the winner for a max case from Rally Queensland. The teams of Michelle Vanderwilk and Ryan Williams had some crazy service feats over the weekend. So you can jump on, read about their stories and vote for them so they can add to their toolkits and add to their collection for their rally exploits further throughout the year.
Yeah, and as you say, Luke, I mean, thanks very much to Max Case, who are a proud supporter of the Special Stage podcast. And we've used the Max Cases, not so much with tools, but certainly with camera gear on events all around the traps these days, and also over in Europe when Matt went there last month. So we can certainly give full credit to the Max Case team for supplying a great product.
I've got to note that out of all those state championship rallies, the Quattro winning, I know it wasn't a state rally per se, it was an AMSAG event, but for a Quattro to win, a car from 1985, to be still driven as hard as that is pretty unbelievable.
It was. And yeah, sure, we know that Mel Keogh was a great driver and he's done very successfully in results in the past. But yeah, that Quattro was certainly the crowd favourite with the flames spitting out the back and the gravel being thrown. And sure, Mal had his, I guess, a bit of luck with a couple of the other guys, Quinny included, having mechanical problems. But to be there at the end, you have to be there to win. So congratulations to Mel.
You sure do. You sure do. Now we're going to keep moving, going to keep rolling. Nothing too much to discuss in Australia on this podcast. So if you're looking for that, sorry about that. We're going to talk about WRC. We're going to talk about the state of the WRC, as you would have seen by the podcast title. We're going to be delving into that pretty closely. We're going to look at where we think the championship's at this year, the teams, the drivers, where we think the championship's moving going forward, the last few rounds of the series, of course. I know from my point of view, I've followed this year a lot more closely, than what I have 2022. Lots is happening and the title is closer this year.
Yeah, that's right, Luke. And I think it's easy for people to sit back and say, okay, well, we're not in Europe and we're not following the WRC event by event on event. But I think sometimes it's good to sit back and just take a broader view of the championship and as to where we think it's at, excuse me. And sure that the ideas that we have won't necessarily be taken on board by the rule makers, obviously, but it's good to have our own points of view. And I'm sure that many of our listeners will have their own viewpoints on the state of the WRC as well.
Yeah, I agree. And those viewpoints are valid from everybody because everybody's got a view on the sport, of course. And it's great that people do have that view. Some people like their sport to go this direction, whereas others would like it to go in a completely polar opposite direction. And for the WRC, it's a really poignant sort of time for them because it's so important that they get this right, particularly the 2028 rules. I know we're going to stay with Rally1 for a little while yet, but yeah, there's lots to unpack. So from your point of view, Peter, I guess, how do we get here in terms of, well, the sport is at a point where maybe it's lagging a little bit?
Yeah, you're probably right, Luke. I mean, I do think that the WRC is still a vital championship and there's huge interest around the world, as we see on social media at every event. In a perfect world, we'd be back into the early 90s probably when we had Toyota and Mitsubishi and Ford and Subaru and all those other manufacturers competing. But we live in a different world these days, and we've only got to see at the moment with the popularity of soccer and the Women's World Cup that's going on and Australia playing in the World Cup semi-finals, how much more relevant sports are on a global basis, whether that be soccer, whether it be netball, whether it be cricket or anything. So manufacturers, while they are producing cars, they certainly have a lot more options as in terms of where they put their sponsorship money. And something like the World Cup soccer for Subaru or for Ford or for anybody like that, that might be a better return on their investment than actually going in the World Rally Championship. So that's one of the key issues that I think the WRC faces moving forward.
That's right. And in terms of a car culture as well, the culture in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s is a lot different to what it is now, where the bulk of the population is in cities across the world. Cars are not used clearly as much as what they have been. The growing population isn't probably being linked to more cars on the road and more new cars on the road. So it's a different way of going. I guess there's no production-based rally cars in the world anymore. They're all four-wheel drive turbocharged cars that aren't sold from the showroom floor. So it's a different stage of motoring in general, as well as the sport of rallying, which is a flow-on effect from motoring.
Yeah, you're right. And certainly if you look at the WRC, right from the Rally1 cars right down to Rally4, the Rally4 Fiesta is a four-wheel drive turbocharged car, which is not available to anybody to purchase as a road car. So therefore, there's no real option there for Ford to come on board and say, here, this is the Rally4 car, go and buy one for yourself and rally it. It's just not a possibility. And I think in Australia, we have no vehicle manufacturing in our country these days. So that's had a big impact. But also, you need to look at the explosion in interest of classic rallying in Australia to see that people are looking at a different way of going about their sport. And instead of spending $100,000 on maybe a new Skoda Rally2 car, if one was available for that price, a lot of people are more likely to put that money into a BDA Escort or a BMW or whatever it might be to do classic rallying.
And it comes from the World Championship. Really, at the end of the day, a Skoda is not a popular rally car here, but it is the most popular Rally 2 car over in Europe. From your point of view, Peter, you had a lot to do with Rally Australia and Rally New Zealand, not from an organisational point of view, clearly, but from a reporting and a media point of view in that Group A, in that early WRC period when there was heaps of manufacturers. If we look at the WRC now, it is lacking in a manufacturer sense. There is 2.5 is generally the common number when people say that. We know M Sport has a significant amount of support from Ford, but it's nowhere near the level of what Hyundai and what Toyota do have. Were there too many manufacturers back then, or is there a sort of a good number to have? I don't know.
It's an interesting question, Luke. I mean, I certainly don't think you could ever say there were too many manufacturers. The problem back then probably was that there wasn't enough podium places for everybody to achieve success.
Yeah.
So in those mid 2000s, when we had Skoda, when we had Hyundai, when we had Sayat, for example, they had great cars, and in any given time they could get a top 5 result, but they didn't have the backing behind them of a Toyota or of a Ford or a Mitsubishi or a Subaru to actually achieve those results. So when that's the case, there's only a certain period of time when a manufacturer will continue to put in millions of dollars every year to not get results. So when Skoda were involved with the World Rally Car, they might have been getting 6th or 7th or 8th, but that's not a result that you can then go and sell to the public and say, hey, look, we got 7th place in the WRC. So that becomes really difficult. But from Rally Australia and certainly Rally New Zealand point of view, I remember back in the day that Australia were hell-bent on sticking with the FIA regulations for their national championship, and that meant Group A and Group N. And that meant that people could go out and buy a Mitsubishi Lancer, whatever the Evo was, or a Subaru WRX, and they could compete at Rally Australia or Rally New Zealand, and they would be competing on an even playing field with the international guys that came out in those category cars. These days, that's not possible.
Yeah, the import costs and whatever of the Rally 4, Rally 3 cars kind of a thing is putting a lot of people out of the way. And when I spoke to Ben Searcy on the podcast, probably a couple of months ago now, he was saying that people in WA chose front-wheel drive cars because they could then go and compete in Rally Australia and try and be competitive in a certain class at Rally Australia. Whereas people across on the East Coast might have still bought their Datsun 1600s and Ford Escorts. Whereas a lot of the young guys in the 90s were getting your front-wheel drive charades, they were getting their Sayats and stuff like that might have been available back in the time. So it's a really tough one to think about, and how the World Championship flows back down to our series is going to be an interesting thing moving forward as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. And certainly with the Australian Championship, clearly at the moment, Rally2 cars and AP4 cars and G4 cars are the way to go with their four-wheel drive turbocharged and all the bells and whistles that they have. But the production championship, which is, I guess, pretty much what our Group N championship used to be, it is still being dominated by Subarus or Mitsubishis, which are now, 30 years old. So it's an interesting thing, and there's no real process of the top line cars filtering down to that production level as the years move forward. So it's an interesting question, not only for World Championship, but for the national championships around the world too.
And as we get into it a little bit later in the pod, we'll talk about costs and stuff from a WRC point of view as well, because clearly the Rally1 cars are very, very expensive to purchase and then to run. So it's a big problem that the WRC has to try and work out cost and where the cost is going to fit in the grand scheme of things, because they might be thinking, as well as anybody might be thinking, that the cost has to be contained in a way that makes the sport sustainable moving forward.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's all very well for anybody with lots of money to go out and buy the latest spec Skoda Rally2 or the Ford Fiesta Rally2, but unless you've got that budget and to continually keep that car up to speed, you're going to struggle. And against the guys like your Solbergs and your Formos and your Mikkelsons, realistically, you're never going to be able to match it with them anyway. So where does that sit in the whole scheme of things?
Toyota in 2023, they've been pretty dominant, I must say. Not as much as what they had been last year, but that's probably simply because Kalle Rovanperä hasn't had a superhuman season. Now, over the past couple of events, he's won stages in big numbers, and it sort of showed some of the dominance he had last year. But Toyota are clearly the number one in my eyes. I think you view them the same. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, 100%, Luke. They're clearly a step ahead of everybody else. And I think you only need to look at the last round in Finland when clearly Rovanperä was leading early on, and then Elvin Evans was pretty much untouchable for the rest of the event. So they've got the runs on the board. They're probably the manufacturers tipping in the most money, you would expect. Hyundai obviously coming second, and then M Sport a long way back. But it's interesting with Rovanperä. I looked at some statistics after his win in Estonia, which made him a 10-time winner of WRC events. If he gets to 11 wins, he'll equal Timo Salonen and Stig Blomqvist. When Salonen won his 11th rally, he was 35. When Blomqvist won his 11th rally, he was 38. We've got to remember Rovanperä is 22.
That's remarkable.
When Sebastian Loeb won his first world championship, he was 30. In reality, Kalle Rovanperä could have 9 world titles by the time he reaches 30.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he continues to improve at the pace that he has, the world's his oyster. I mean, he could break all the records.
About a month ago, there was talk of Rovanperä talking to Hyundai about a role there next year. Now, I think that was a beat up, and I think we spoke about it on the podcast, saying that those reports came out. I know that, they might have happened. He might have talked to Hyundai, but if Toyota haven't got him under lock and key, I don't know what they're trying to do, because if he's got a contract in front of him, surely they've got to be able to make him sign it and give him a blank check, give whatever you need to do to keep him there and keep him interested in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be almost, it'd knock you over with a feather if Rovanperä signed for somebody else, and he's certainly going to stay there as far as I can see. I mean, Hyundai would love him, but so would everybody else. But the other chat that's been about after Rally Finland was the obvious possibility that Sebastian Ogier could go to Hyundai next year on a part-time program, and that's the only manufacturer Ogier hasn't driven for. Maybe that'll happen, but again, he doesn't want a full program, so it would only be selected events.
Yeah, I think that's a similar situation to Rovanperä in terms of, there's some talk going on, but really, once the contract's there ready to be signed, I don't think he's going to be looking too far away from Toyota and the car that served him so well over the past few years.
Yeah. The next guy we're going to chat about is Elvin Evans, who was clearly the Rally Finland winner. I must say that before Finland and after probably, even though he was second in the title race, I thought he'd had an average season this year. Hadn't shown the pace to actually go out and beat his teammate, and probably still hasn't. I was expecting that maybe Evans had one more contract left in him for next year, and then who knows. But Rally Finland, it takes a special driver to win that rally, and it's the second time he's done it. So he might have just bought himself a bit more time, Evans.
Mm. And same to speak about Takamoto Katsuta as well. I think he was in a similar boat in terms of, well, where's he at? Sort of before Finland. Estonia was a pretty horrible event for him. He finished below Pierre-Louis Loubet on simply speed alone. So for Takamoto to get a podium in Finland really turns his fortunes around and probably gives him a good confidence boost that he might need to then springboard into the last few rounds of the season and then into next year, where really if he's not tackling events at 110% and looking for stage wins on each day of every rally, you don't know how long Toyota are going to keep looking after him like they are.
That's right. And I've been disappointed with Taka this year. And what is it, his fourth year in the top line, I think, this year. And I think the fact that he's occasionally on the podium is a great thing, but it's far, far from where Toyota would expect him to be. And we know that he was brought into the team as part of the Japanese young driver program, and he's clearly a world-class driver, but his results haven't been what I expected so far.
It'll be interesting to see at what point does he become separated from that Japanese driver program. Maybe it's already happened. Maybe Toyota are already choosing him on merit, but whether there's still some lingering ideas and stuff like that about, well, he's come through our driver development program, we need a Japanese driver in the team. I wonder how much that's hanging around, particularly when Ogier is still there, who's capable of winning events whenever he turns up.
Yeah, and I think another curveball there is the fact that Sami Payari, who's obviously a former junior champion and doing very, very well in the WRC program this year, has been linked to Toyota's Rally2 car for next year. So if you get a young Finn on board who's driving for his local team, I guess you'd say, being a Finnish-based team, maybe if Ogier did happen to go and do some events for Hyundai, maybe Payari comes in and does the odd Rally1 event as well. So that would then put further pressure on Takamoto.
Hyundai, Thierry Neuville and Esteban Lappi have been a lot closer than what they thought, I would say, throughout the start of 2023. Neuville's clearly the number one driver, and I think Lappi would have signed knowing that. And regardless of what it said on his contract, I think he would have known that if push come to shove, Neuville would be ahead of him. But on the fast rallies, Lappi showed a great amount of pace, but then again, so did Neuville. And they're in a funny situation, Hyundai, because they've got Teemu Sunen, who's driven the last couple of rallies. Danny Sordo might be out the door at the end of the year, simply based on retirement. So they've probably got the most decisions to make, from my point of view, in terms of next year and where their future lies.
Yeah, you might be right. And Neuville's an interesting one, and he's sitting third in the championship. And you're right, his speed on the fast gravel rallies has been much, much improved than what it has been in previous seasons. He's also made some small, silly mistakes again this year, which has cost him good results. And yeah, I don't know, how long has Thierry been at Hyundai now? Is it 10 years?
Yeah, it's been, this is his 10th year now. So he started with them in 2014 when they first came in.
Yeah, so and he still hasn't won the championship. I can't see him winning the championship in that car, if I'm brutally honest. And probably more on Thierry's inconsistency in some regards, more so than the car. Lappi's an interesting one too. I mean, it's now 7 years since Lappi won his one and only WRC event in Finland back in 2016. That's a long time ago. And
17, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, 17. So, and he really hasn't been close to winning an event since. We know he had some time at Citroen, he had some time at M Sport. He showed great pace in the Hyundai this year. But another one for me, he has been fast, but he has been a bit disappointing in recent years, in my mind.
Do you think Teemu Sunen gets the drive again next year, whether it be a part-time program or a full-time program?
He certainly hasn't done himself any disservice over the last two events.
Absolutely.
I think what did he get, a sixth and a fifth or something like that in the two events that he's done in the car. And obviously he hasn't done a lot of miles in it. He's done some testing in that car. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, clearly, again, he's a world-class driver, but he had that bad period at M Sport Ford where he wasn't on the pace and he kept making silly mistakes. Whether that's in the past now, let's hope for him that it is. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's, like you say, he's done himself so many favors over the past couple of events. But did Toyota come calling? He's a Finn. Toyota might not think that Pyar is ready. I don't know whether Sunonen can turn down a part-time role with Toyota. I don't know. I don't know anything about the rumors or anything like that that are at the heart of the WRC service park, but I don't know. It's just something I could see happening. Sunonen could head across to Toyota and yeah, leave Hyundai in the lurch looking and searching hard again.
And I guess that once again, that will depend on the futures of other drivers, whether Neuvilla's hanging around at Hyundai for a long period, whether Elvin Evans is going to be at Toyota for much longer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It all comes down to how many events each driver is given per year and what the checkbook says.
Exactly. In terms of M Sport, I know you've got some strong opinions on M Sport and their strategy for the second driver. We've done a bit of research clearly before the podcast, and not since 2012 has someone other than Ogier, Tanak, or Loeb won for M Sport. So through all that time, they've only had 3 winners. And Peter, your tip is just get another second driver who's faster than the Frenchman they've got at the minute.
I think so. And look, I mean, in my opinion, Ott Tanak is equal fastest or second fastest driver in the World Championship. I mean, he and Rovanpera, I think, are clearly ahead of everybody else. I think the M Sport Puma is the third best car in the service park, but Tanak is continually winning stages and showing how good he is. And nothing against Pierre-Louis Loubet. But again, he's done every rally this season. He's sitting 10th in the championship. He's made some silly errors. His speed hasn't been anywhere near as fast as what it was last year, based on results and stage times. And as you say, Luke, I think at some point, M Sport Ford need to say, what are we in this for? Because every rally that we go into with only 2 cars and one driver capable of winning, it just puts it on such a knife edge as to whether you get a result or don't. And in the last 2 events, they've had engine problems in Tanak's car. And as soon as that happens, their chance of a victory or a podium has gone out the window. So, as I say, at some point, somebody needs to open the checkbook and say, right, we need to sign an Esa-Pekka Lappi or whoever it might be, but somebody who's capable of actually winning rallies.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I wonder if the checkbook's already open as far as it goes. Maybe that's the limit. Maybe signing Ott Tanak, maybe running the 2 Rally1 cars is the limit of what M Sport and what their budget can do. It's a tough one to really know and understand without delving too far into it. And I think realistically, Loubet's a third driver. He's not a second driver who's going to be trying to go for podiums. He's a guy that possibly should be in a part-time Toyota or a part-time Hyundai, not a full-time role with M Sport trying to get good results.
Yeah, and potentially you're right. And last year, obviously, M Sport had a horror season. They had Craig Breen, who finished third in 2 events, I think. They had Gus Greensmith, who was now getting solidly beaten in the Rally 2 class. And they had Adrian Formeau, who's doing great things, I must say, this year in the Ford Fiesta Rally 2. But he wasn't consistently near the pace last year. So you're right. I'm sure the checkbook is probably open as wide as it can go. But at some point, you need to make that decision. Say, okay, what are we in it for? And if it's to get on the podium and win rallies, we need to make sure that can happen.
Who from Rally 2 do you think they could sign? We can go round and round talking about M Sport trying to get another driver. But is there anybody that actually could come in who's a realistic chance of getting on a podium, of doing that kind of stuff? And you've got to think as well at the back of the mind, they've got to bring budget too. So it's not an easy question to answer.
Straight off the top of my head, I would say Oliver Solberg. I mean, he had 12 months or almost 12 months in a Rally 1 car last year with Hyundai before he got dropped just after Rally New Zealand. He's shown this year that he's the class act in Rally 2 driving a Skoda. The one issue there is that Solberg comes with Monster Energy backing, and M Sport are currently backed by Red Bull. So there's a problem in itself.
Yeah.
Outside Solberg, I really don't know, Luke. I mean, I would think Andreas Mikkelsen, his time has passed. Gus Greensmith is not fast enough. Sami Payari is going to Toyota from all reports. Formeau may come back, but again, he's not proven. Yeah, it's a really tough decision. And unless you go back to Sebastian Loeb or your Sebastian Ogier or those sort of guys, but that's heading backwards.
Mm. I wouldn't be surprised if Adrian Formo gets a gig at one or two of the remaining rallies in the
Yep.
Puma, because M Sport have got to be thinking about next year already, as Toyota are, as Hyundai are as well. It was understood when Oyt Tanak signed that it was a multi-year deal, so let's assume that Oyt's sticking around at M Sport. Does Lube have a role next year? Or where does Formo fit into it? I can't see Adrian moving anywhere other than M Sport. You got to start looking forward and thinking about what the strategy is for 2024 as well.
You do, and even though there's lots of drivers there, it's winning drivers that you need. And the list of winning drivers, if we look at the top 10 of the WRC, I mean, okay, the first 6 drivers have won rallies. Danny Sordo's won a rally. Sordo's too old; he's not going to M Sport. So there, it's slim pickings, and it's taking a punt whether M Sport try and poach a driver, whether they try and get an Elvin Evans back. Maybe that's an option back to the British-based team. But again, I'm not sure on Elvin Evans' contract whether it's signed up for next year or what the story is. But they need to pull a rabbit out of the hat, I reckon, just to make sure that they go into next year with a couple of chances of winning with every event.
Yeah, it's been a while since a young driver has come into M Sport and done really, really well. Oyt Tanak clearly was the guy in 2017 who got a couple of wins under his belt. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to be able to find a young driver when the gap is so large from the top of Rally 1 to what the graduates of Rally 2 are coming into the series with. So it's a big question and a hard one to be able to answer from M Sport's point of view. Does that mean, though, that I'm just thinking on the spot here, does that mean the gap between Rally 1 and Rally 2 is too big? Peter, if you're trying to get a graduate from Rally 2 into a Rally 1 car and they're simply nowhere, let's say Oliver Solberg wins the Rally 2 title, which is clearly WRC 2 this year. If he gets to a Toyota, a Hyundai, or a Ford, does he come immediately on this pace? I don't think he does.
Probably not without lots of testing. And
Yeah.
clearly there's some issues there about a number of testing days and all that as well. Yeah, I think in Estonia, wasn't it, when Tanak had the engine change and got the 5-minute penalty before the rally? I think at the end of the first day, the first full day, he was back up in front of all the Rally 2 cars. So it just goes to show what the difference in the speed is. I think the other side of that coin, though, is that the Rally 2 class is so successful at the moment. It's so well populated with drivers with different teams that it's difficult to change something that's not broken. Skoda are well involved, Hyundai are well involved, M Sport are well involved with the Fiesta, Toyota are coming on board next year. So there's lots of great drivers in that category. I think it would be very difficult to change the class structure of that to try and reduce the gap. But again, as you're saying, it doesn't solve the problem of younger drivers being ready to make that next step and being clearly on the pace straight away.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure where it goes really because, like we say, it's a big gap. But then again, the Rally 2 class is so successful. It was first introduced as R5, clearly, is what most people know it as, in about 2013, I believe. So it's been around for a long time. It hasn't stayed the same, of course. Cars evolve and stuff like that. But yeah, it's an old category because European wouldn't have stuck around for all that long. It might have stuck around for 10 years, maybe, Peter, before it really.
But I think the issue here, Luke, is that the FIA and the World Rally Championship, they've made their bed. I mean, they've created this problem in 2017 when they said that the 2017 World Rally cars weren't able to be driven by privateers. So therefore, since that time, which is what now, it's 6 years, that if M Sport or Hyundai or Toyota want to sell a car to a privateer to run, they can't do it because they're not allowed to use them. So therefore, there's none of your Mads Osbergs or Oliver Solbergs or Adrian Formos who are actually able to get a budget and purchase an ex-factory car and run it as a Rally 1 car and try and push against these works drivers and show how fast they are. They've only got the option of running Rally 2. So therefore, the WRC has caused this problem, and the gap is huge, as we say, but unless they change those rules, there's no way around it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. One thing is the ruling in terms of who can drive those cars and what the rule was, particularly at the start of 2017, in terms of who could drive those cars. But like you sort of touched on very briefly, the cost is just another thing altogether because, yeah, trying to privately fund a Rally 1 drive is almost untouchable. Well, it is for 99.9% of the population. So
Yeah,
it's
and
hard.
one of the small gripes I've had over the past few seasons, and I understand why it happens, is that there's guys like Jordan Sertorides and Battelli who've got plenty of money. Can go and run these Rally One cars, and they run a factory car that's sort of a third car through the teams. Wouldn't it be fantastic to see those guys with the budget to go and support one of the younger guys and say, here, have 3 or 4 events in this car for this year, instead of me driving and finishing outside the top 10 and slower than most of the Rally 2 cars. You go and drive it and show us what you can do. But unfortunately, and for whatever reasons, that's not happening. And we're not seeing these younger drivers given these opportunities, which probably happened back in the Group A days more so.
And the early WRC days too, because those cars weren't expensive or weren't as expensive as what the cars are currently. So maybe it's a cost cap. I know Formula One have got it in a cost cap that's caused its controversy in a number of different ways in terms of what teams are under the cost cap, which teams are over the cost cap. But I know clearly Rally 2, Rally 3, Rally 4 have cost caps in terms of the price and the buying price of the cars. Maybe that Rally 1 in its evolution, when that comes in 2025, needs to have a cost cap to make them a little bit more affordable for the teams that might want to step up from a Rally 2 and rent a private car, for example.
Yeah, and that's true. And one of the other issues is the fact that, like we alluded to earlier, when Seat and Skoda and Hyundai were running back in the 2000s, I mean, if you're a different manufacturer at the moment, and I don't know, pick it Nissan or whoever it might be, which manufacturer is going to come in and say, I want to build a Rally 1 car, and then suddenly they've got to be able to match Hyundai and Toyota and the budget they're putting in. Not only have they got to spend the budget to develop the car, but they've then got to be able to run the car, pay the top driver. It's almost an impossible scenario for them. It's not as though it's you get the best tennis player and you put him into the Australian Open and he's going to go and win or finish in the semi-finals. This is almost an impossibility that we're talking about.
And the problem comes as well, like we've been saying, who do M Sport get as their third driver? There's nobody capable of getting on the podium. So if a new manufacturer comes in, they've got to sell the farm to try and get a rally winning driver that there aren't many of, and then try and get good results. Just simply based on the number of Rally 1 cars. Let's say a fourth manufacturer comes in, they're probably going to get on the podium once or twice a year. But that's solely because cars are going to fall away, they're going to not finish, and there's going to be cars that are going to be faster clearly than the Rally 2 cars. So your new manufacturer will get some success, but where do you judge your success? You're competing in a world championship. You don't want to be fighting for 6th and 7th most weekends.
No, and Suzuki is a prime example of that, Luke.
Yeah, you're right.
Back in the day when Suzuki were running fantastic front-wheel drive Formula 2 cars, they stepped up to the WRC level, and yeah, they had the odd result here and there, but they just didn't have the budget or, I guess, the backing of all the right components that made it work to succeed. And after a couple of years, they disappeared, and we haven't seen them since. And probably a similar thing happens in Formula One. Sure, there's 22, 24 cars starting every race, but you know before the start that there's only 2 or 3 guys that are going to be able to win.
Yeah, I agree. And Suzuki only stuck around for 1 year, and a lot of that was the global financial crisis of when they came in. The timing wasn't all that great for them, but yeah, it's a simple fact of, well, you come in and you finish 7th and 8th and you retire and you finish 10th. It's nothing to write home about to the management and to the people who were ticking off the budget. And Mini was a similar example. They were getting the results. They didn't win, but Danny Sordo would have got 4 or 5 podiums for them. Even then, they weren't able to continue their program that looked really, really promising through the parts of 2011 and 2012 when Sordo was doing well.
Yeah, I don't want to continually be negative about it because it seems at the moment that we are, but like you're saying with Mini, and you've only got to look at Subaru. Subaru are one of the most successful manufacturers that the WRC has had, and And even still today, they have a cult following that if they joined the championship again tomorrow, they would have thousands and thousands of fans overnight. But you have to ask why, since Subaru pulled the pin at the end of 2008, why haven't they been back? That's 15 years. Subaru would know as much as anybody what sort of a reputation they have in rallying, but for reasons which I'm sure are financial, there are all sorts of reasons, but they haven't been back. There's got to be a big reason there, and that's the sort of issue that the WRC needs to approach and find out, how do we get these manufacturers back? It might not be Nissan, or it might not be Daihatsu or whoever. It might be your Subarus who have been there in the past that they need to get back.
So where does it go then? We mentioned earlier about the Rally1 regulations are moving forward into a bit of a different evolution in 2025. They won't be drastic changes. And then again in 2028, when the new rule set comes in, for that year in, what is it now, 4.5 years, when Monte Carlo, we assume in 2028 comes around, that it could be hydrogen, it could be full electric, it could be internal combustion engines, it could be hybrid. It's a big question, but where does it go to get better? Is it a general thing of tightening things up from a cost perspective, from a speed perspective, to bring Rally1 and Rally2 together? Do they really have to nail the way they're powered? What do you think on that?
I think it really needs to be a more level playing field. And I'm not saying that it's not at the moment, but maybe a budget constraint like you were talking about, Luke, might be the way to go. And it needs to be set up so that a new manufacturer can come in and be able to have success or relative success early on to make their investment worthwhile. We know that there's drivers out there who are capable of driving these cars. And sure, we're talking about M Sport picking a second driver and who that might be. But given the right opportunities, and if the category was right and everything fell into place, you could easily see 10 or a dozen or 15 guys who are capable of winning rallies. But that's the next thing. I mean, I think you've mentioned that the WRC is coming out with a new promotional package via their Rally TV program. I think a lot of the success of the sport moving forward needs to be via social media, via online streaming, all those modern things these days, and that will have a lot of bearing on the success of the championship. There's no question at the moment that the Rally1 cars are sensational to watch. They're by far and away the fastest rally cars we've ever seen. But making the general public aware of that is the next best, or is the next step. I mean, Formula One gets incredible ratings on TV every time there's a race on, but WRC obviously doesn't. They need to find out what that reason is and how they approach that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a case of using the Formula One's strategy in terms of Drive to Survive, the clearly successful Netflix show, and copying it and pasting it into the world of the WRC. I think it's a different approach that's going to work. But what that approach is, nobody knows. It's really, really hard to think about what is the next step. But I think, like you say, it's the promotional aspect of things and getting the mix right of the car, the championship, the promotion, the drivers, the pathways. Yeah, it's a multi-pronged approach that, yeah, it's hard to think of.
It is. And I mean, the WRC All Live coverage of the sport, which is clearly has live coverage of every stage of the championship, has been a wonderful innovation. And I must admit that I watch way too much of it. But I also believe that the coverage has barely changed over the years. You tune into any rally and it's the same coverage. You see the same type of footage. You have the same commentators. It hasn't evolved as it should have done. And I think that's clearly a big fault from the promoter. And Red Bull is the promoter of the WRC. Sure, it's been successful, and I'm sure they've got thousands of subscribers. But to be able to get the new rally fans in who might necessarily be keen on the sport and currently watching Formula One every week, to get them over to rallying, things need to change a bit. And the format of the rallies, maybe. I mean, I'm all for longer rallies and more endurance, but that's not what is going to keep the younger people entertained these days. A 6-day or a 5-day rally is not the answer.
Yeah.
So different formats of the events, whether they change the rules on a Sunday. I mean, we could talk about this sort of thing for never ending.
Mm.
But certainly changes to the coverage, I think, need to happen fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I can see over the past couple of events, the all live coverage is changing slightly. But then again, if you're a casual rally fan, you're not subscribing to WRC Plus All Live. You're only looking at YouTube. You're only looking at what props up on your social media feed. You're not looking at All Live to get your rally content. You're not paying for it if you're a casual fan.
That's right.
And to be honest, a lot of rally people aren't going to subscribe to WRC All Live. So you've got to get the content mix right from a free platform's perspective and make sure that's all right. And whether it's live TV arrangements on a Sunday that happen on a set period, like you might see for a Formula One weekend, it could be the same thing with the WRC. And
I
there's
think,
people much above our pay grade to try and work these things out. We're just only discussing it, aren't we?
yeah, and I think the coverage of the WRC has been sanitized or dumbed down way too much. There are no real personalities in the sport anymore, or at least we don't get shown those personalities. You look at the coverage from Rally Finland, the most exciting interviews at the end of stages was from Jari-Matti Latvala. I mean, it's the first time he'd done rally for how many years? And the Craig Breen interviews when he would break down in tears over something, that's all the stuff that matters. At the moment, we get to the end of the stage. Elvin Evans is a perfect example. He would give the same answer every stage end. There's one question asked, he gives the whatever answer he needs to give that doesn't give away any more information than he needs, and then off they go. There's none of this probing sort of stuff that the rally fan would like to hear. And I understand they have time constraints and all these sorts of things, but it's not giving the fans the insight that they need or certainly that they want.
And I think from an Australian point of view, the organisers of our national championship can take a bit out of that in terms of you've got to keep things moving. You can't have things stagnant in terms of what the TV coverage looks like, what the social media coverage looks like. The live power stage has got to mix it up and change. What new can they add to it? What ways can you bring in more people to view that kind of stuff from a different angle? You know, what worked in 2021 when the ARC launched their live power stage possibly is not going to work now. So what can be moved forward and what can be worked on to be improved and create a better viewing experience for a user, not only a passionate rally fan, but also a casual observer.
Yeah, and as you say, this relates to all branches of the sport, not just the WRC, and the ARC Power Stage is possibly a good example. I mean, its coverage it's got better as it's gone on. Whether having it on 7 Mate on a Sunday afternoon is the place for it, I don't know. Maybe it's better live streamed on Facebook. But these are questions that I'm sure national championships around the world are discussing, and the more the WRC can do and evolve in that sense and in that sphere, I guess it's the better it's going to be for the sport worldwide.
Yeah, the WRC is a leader, like the ARC is a leader for rallying in Australia. The WRC is the standard, so they've got to be the ones moving forward, setting examples. You can't expect a small national championship in Croatia to be able to throw the budget at a brand new live streaming platform and a live streaming strategy that's going to work amazingly. It's got to be the WRC that leads that. And I think over time they will do that. And I think they're aware now that they've got to be the ones leading and innovating and all that kind of stuff that perhaps hasn't been done since they launched their whiz bang all live program. What is it, 5 years ago?
Yeah, and even as you're talking about social media, and I mean, remember when we had Rally Australia at Coffs Harbour up until 2018 and 2019 when it was called off because of the bushfires, they had a tremendous social media program running through the guys at R6 Digital up in Brisbane. They had, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they had more social media followers than any other event in the championship, and they just continually churned out content all the time, and it was fantastic stuff. And that's the sort of thing that needs to happen, and goes to prove that you don't have to be the biggest event or the event with the biggest budget to get the best results.
That's true. We could go round and round in circles. We've covered a lot of things. For 2028, there's a new rule set. In a few words, Peter, where do you think it goes? Do you think it's hydrogen? Do you think it's still a hybrid thing in 2028? We're going to look back at this and think we were completely off the mark in terms of what actually happens. But do you think it's a hybrid thing still?
I really don't know, Luke. I mean, you would say yes, I guess,
Yeah,
given the way things are going. But
I think so. Yeah.
I think regardless of what the category is and what the regulation set is, the two things that it needs the cars to be exciting to watch
Mhm.
and to make lots of noise. I think that's the two key factors that sets rallying aside from almost all other motorsports.
Mhm.
The sound of a rally car approaching in the forest when it's still 3 or 4 kilometers away, the vision of it coming into view sideways and throwing rocks and hurling dust up behind it. That's the stuff that makes rallying the number one motorsport in the world, I believe. And I think whatever the regulations are in terms of the engines go, they're the two key factors: is the noise and the ability to make the cars exciting. Whether that's front wheel drive, whether it's rear wheel drive, four wheel drive, I don't know. But yeah, the FIA has got a lot of headaches to get over between now and then, I reckon, to make sure they come up with the right formula. Because if they're making a rule set for 3 or 4 years, they only get one chance of getting it right at the start.
This is arguably the most important rule set, the one coming up for 2028. Keep in mind now that there is an evolution coming in 2025, but that 2028 one is really where it's going to be important. Winding things up, Peter, I've got a podcast scheduled in with Scott Petter. We're going to chat with Scott Petter on Friday, and we're going to talk to him about the Gippsland Rally and what he's thinking about in terms of his Australian Rally Championship return. He's in a top flight car. Could he win? I reckon I'm going to ask him that straight off the bat. Does he think he can win? I don't know whether he'll think he can win. He's had a little bit of time out, but he did the event last year, so we'll wait and see what he says.
Ability wise, Scott can win for sure, but
Yeah.
it's the match practice and the match fitness that he's going to lack.
Yeah.
It's difficult to be able to come on board for the first event and match it with Harry and Lewis Bates and Nathan Quinn. For sure, the car that Scott's driving, the Skoda Fabia, is going to be quick, and I'm sure those Gippsland roads will suit him really well. But whether he can pull it all together on the weekend remains to be seen. But it's going to be great to watch.
I would just love it if he comes out on the first stage and wins it. That would generate a lot of talk, and the interest would skyrocket in terms of the championship to have another person there on the pace ready for the weekend. So we'll ask him all those questions and chat to him generally about how he's been going over the past little while and what he thinks. So keep an eye out for that early next week on the podcast. Peter, thanks for your time. We've covered a lot of things. Some stuff we don't know about, some stuff we do know about. There's lots of stuff to talk about in the rally world, but it's good again to catch up with you.
Yeah, it's been great, Luke. And I think, as I said before, the WRC, it's maybe not in the best place that it's been over its history, but it's still incredibly exciting to watch. And each event for me is must-watch sort of stuff, and to see who's going to win and who's going to set the fastest stage times and how much Kelly Rovanpera is going to win by.
Let's see if he continues to get on form with his dominance and win the title. It'll be good to see as the year goes out. Thanks so much for your time. We'll speak to you next week.
Good on you, Luke.